Pamela Hartford grew up surrounded by the luxury and privilege afforded by her family's wealth. Her father, Richard Hartford, was an industrial magnate whose name resonated with respect and admiration in the most elite business circles. As an only child, Pamela was the center of her parents' universe, provided with every conceivable opportunity and comfort. From a young age, Pamela was accustomed to a life of excess. Her room resembled a wing of a palace, filled with toys from all over the world, handmade dresses, and first editions of classic children's books bound in leather. "Darling, what would you like for your birthday this year? A party at Disney, or would you prefer a private tour of Paris?" her mother would ask, always ready to make any wish come true. Richard, on the other hand, insisted on the importance of education. "Pamela, my little princess, knowledge is the only treasure that no one can take away from you," he would say during dinner, served at a table that could easily accommodate a dozen guests. This is how Pamela ended up attending the finest private schools, where renowned teachers were practically summoned to provide an exemplary education tailored to her curiosities and capabilities. During vacations, while other youths might explore amusement parks, Pamela visited museums and archaeological sites with private guides, learning about the world in a way few could dream of. All this shaped a sophisticated young woman, astutely aware of the power her social and intellectual position conferred upon her. Pamela's life changed abruptly and tragically on the day she turned 20. It was an autumn morning, leaves dancing in the wind, as she prepared for a video conference with her parents, who were on a business trip in Europe. Pamela expected to hear about new industrial acquisitions and future plans that her father, Richard, enthusiastically shared, always preparing her to eventually succeed him. The laptop screen showed the scheduled call, but instead of seeing her parents' smiling faces, the image remained static, the sound of an unanswered call echoing through the room. Uneasily, Pamela tried again, without success. "Strange, they are never late," she murmured to herself, feeling a twinge of anxiety. Hours of agonizing silence followed until the mansion's doorbell rang. Pamela descended the stairs, her footsteps echoing in the corridors, until she met the family lawyer at the entrance, accompanied by two executives from her father's company. The grim expressions on each of their faces were a harbinger of bad news. Pamela, the lawyer, began with a trembling voice she had never heard before. "There was a terrible accident. The plane your father and mother were on, there were no survivors." The words fell on her like an avalanche, crushing the air from her lungs. The shock was so immediate and profound that Pamela could barely form coherent thoughts. She leaned against the doorframe, her legs failing to support her weight. "But this can't be true," she whispered, denial mixing with the sharp pain beginning to be felt in her chest. "We had so many plans. They can't have just gone like this." At that moment, everything she knew, every future she had imagined alongside her parents, crumbled. Pamela found herself alone, facing not only the abyss of loss, but also the colossal weight of a business empire that now rested on her young and unprepared shoulders. In the days following the tragic news of her parents' deaths, Pamela faced not only her grief but also the overwhelming reality of having to lead the Hartford industrial empire. The mansion, once full of life and laughter, now echoed with a sepulchral silence, interrupted only by the whispers of the servants and the sound of her footsteps through the corridors. She found herself lost in a sea of responsibilities she had never wished for so soon. One morning, while reviewing some of her father's documents, the complexity of the business operations overwhelmed her. "How am I going to manage all this?" she wondered, feeling the weight of uncertainty. It was then that she remembered Franklin Morris, her father's right-hand man and her most trusted friend. With a mix of hesitation and necessity, Pamela picked up the phone and dialed Franklin's number. He answered almost immediately, his voice conveying a reassuring calm. "Franklin, it's Pamela. I really need help. All this is too much for me." "Alone, Pamela dear. I was already expecting your call," Franklin replied, his voice laden with sympathy and determination. "Your father had great respect for your capabilities, and I share the same opinion. I'll be there tomorrow, and we can start getting everything in order. You are not alone in this." Encouraged by his support, Pamela felt a spark of hope. The next day, Franklin arrived at the Hartford mansion with a folder full of documents and a resolute attitude. Seated in the library, where Richard used to review his contracts, Franklin began to explain the basics of business management, from daily operations to long-term strategies. Let's start with a general review of your main business areas and identify where you need to be more involved, Franklin suggested, opening a detailed chart. I'll be by your side every step of the way, Pamela. We will honor your parents' legacy. Under the meticulous guidance of Franklin, Pamela began to master the complexities of Hartford businesses. Each day, each mentoring session with Franklin was like a master class in business management and leadership. They spent hours in the company's imposing conference room, where Franklin unraveled the secrets of financial reports, marketing strategies, and nuances of international negotiations. See, Pamela, each decision we make must be calculated to maximize not just profits but also the company's long-term sustainability, Franklin explained, pointing to the growth projections on one of the charts. Your father was a master at this, and I see that you have the same business instinct. Initially hesitant in her new responsibilities, Pamela found confidence in Franklin's words and in her own ability to learn quickly. "Franklin, how can I ensure that we are moving in the right direction?" she asked during one of their meetings, her pen hovering over the investment report. "Trust your instincts, Pamela, and keep asking the right questions," advised Franklin with an encouraging smile. "You are already thinking like a true CEO, and remember, transparency and ethics are just as important as the numbers. Your father always prized that." Inspired by Franklin's wisdom and her father's legacy, Pamela began to implement her own ideas, which were often innovative and risky, but always well calculated. She introduced new technologies and sustainable practices, which improved production efficiency and strengthened the company's market image. Her efforts began to bear visible fruits. Under her leadership, the company expanded into new markets and achieved record profitability. The respect she gained in the business world was palpable, with many who were initially skeptical about her youth and inexperience now praising her vision and determination. "You really are proving to be an exceptional leader," Pamela Franklin praised during one of their quarterly reviews. Richard would have been proud. On a rainy autumn day, while the corridors of Hartford Industries echoed with the usual buzz of a corporation in full operation, the routine was interrupted by the arrival of a new candidate for a strategic position in the company, Albert Simmons. With his meticulously tailored suit and a leather briefcase in hand, he entered the main lobby, projecting an aura of confidence and professionalism. At the reception, he introduced himself with a charismatic smile. "Good morning, my name is Albert Simmons. I'm here for an interview with Mr. Franklin Morris," he said, extending a firm hand to the receptionist. "Of course, Mr. Simmons. Mr. Morris is expecting you. Please follow me," replied the receptionist, leading him through the corridors adorned with portraits of the founders and company awards. Arriving at Franklin's office door, Albert adjusted his jacket, took a deep breath, and knocked gently. "Come in," he heard Franklin's firm voice from the other side. Franklin stood up from his chair with a welcoming smile upon seeing Albert. "Mr. Simmons, it's a pleasure to finally meet you." "Please have a seat," invited Franklin, indicating a chair in front of his desk. "I've read your resume, and I'm quite impressed. Tell me more about your experience and how you believe you can contribute to our company." During the interview, as Franklin carefully examined Albert's resume, his attention was diverted by a gesture from the candidate. Albert, with genuine curiosity, pointed to a large painting hanging on the office wall, which depicted Richard and Pamela at a company gala event. "If I may ask, who are these people in the painting? They seem to be quite significant to the company," inquired Albert, tilting his head slightly in respect. Franklin followed Albert's gaze, and a soft smile lit his face as he spoke of his old friend and the young woman who now led Hartford Industries. "Ah, that's Richard Hartford, the founder of our company, and beside him is his daughter, Pamela Hartford. Richard unfortunately passed away some time ago in a tragic accident, leaving the company's leadership in Pamela's hands, who has been doing a remarkable job ever since." Albert nodded with understanding and respect. "I'm sorry to hear about his passing. It's always challenging to succeed such esteemed leadership, but it seems like Pamela is up to the task." "Indeed, she has proven to be an exceptional leader," agreed Franklin, feeling increasingly convinced of Albert's suitability for the position. "Now, let's continue. I would like to know more about your leadership strategies and how you handle challenges in high-pressure environments." As the interview proceeded, the discussion deepened into management tactics and innovation. Albert shared his experiences with contagious enthusiasm, and Franklin was visibly impressed by Albert's ability to bring new perspectives and creative solutions to complex problems. At the end of the interview, Franklin extended his hand, sealing the decision. "Albert, I believe your experience and vision align perfectly with the values and objectives of Hartford Industries. I'm looking forward to having you on our team as an analyst." Albert, with a grateful smile, firmly shook Franklin's hand. "I am truly honored, Mr. Morris. I look forward to contributing and growing with the company." With this promise of mutual collaboration and respect, the interview concluded, marking the beginning of a new chapter for Albert at Hartford Industries. Albert quickly adapted to the dynamic environment of Hartford Industries, proving himself a competent professional and a true innovator. His impact was felt almost immediately after joining the team. He took the lead on challenging projects, applying a mix of technical knowledge and strategic vision that began to reshape the company's operations. In a team meeting, with the room filled with managers and directors, Albert presented a detailed analysis of a new project that promised to increase production efficiency and significantly reduce costs. "Based on our current capacity and using the latest data analysis, we can restructure our operations to maximize production without compromising quality," explained Albert, projecting charts and tables that demonstrated his recommendations. Initially skeptical, his colleagues quickly became convinced when they saw the data presented by Albert. Pamela, who attended the presentation, was particularly impressed. After the meeting, she approached him, a smile of approval on her lips. "Albert, your work today was exceptional. I'm really impressed with how you've delved into the complexities of our processes and proposed such innovative solutions," she praised. "Thank you, Pamela. I'm here to contribute and help the company reach new heights. I firmly believe in the potential of our team and what we can achieve together," replied Albert, his voice conveying genuine commitment. As the months passed, Albert continued to excel. His name became synonymous with efficiency and innovation within the company. He led by example, often the first to arrive and the last to leave the office. His interpersonal skills did not go unnoticed. He was a master at motivating his team, maintaining a perfect balance between being demanding and encouraging. "You really brought a new energy to the team," commented Franklin in one of their conversations. "I see great leadership in you, and it's reflecting throughout your department." With recognition coming from all sides and a rising reputation, Albert solidified his position as a valuable pillar within Hartford Industries. His growth in the workplace was the direct result of his dedication, skill, and, most crucially, his ability to transform challenges into opportunities. As Albert solidified his position at Hartford Industries, his relationship with Pamela naturally began to evolve. Their frequent professional encounters, initially strictly focused on business, gradually transformed into more personal conversations and shared moments that transcended the walls of the office. On a sunny afternoon, while reviewing the progress of a new project in the company garden, Pamela commented, "You know, Albert, it's refreshing to see someone with so much dedication and passion for their work. You've brought a new perspective that's really moving the company forward." Albert smiled before responding, "Thank you, Pamela. It's a great pleasure to work here, and part of that is being able to collaborate directly with you. I learn a lot every day." These moments became more frequent, and the barriers between boss and subordinate began to dissolve, giving way to genuine camaraderie. At a corporate event, while discussing future strategies for the company, Pamela and Albert discovered they shared a passion for contemporary art. "I had no idea you also liked modern art," Pamela exclaimed, visibly surprised. As they discussed a recent exhibition they both had visited independently, Albert laughed. "Oh yes, it's one of my passions. I think art has a lot to teach us about innovation and perspective, something we can apply to our work here." The months passed, and these interactions deepened the relationship between Pamela and Albert. Lunches together to discuss business slowly turned into dinners to share life stories, laughs, and future dreams. They began to support each other, solidifying a friendship. "You've become a true friend," Albert Pamela confided over coffee. "I don't know how I would have faced some of these recent challenges without your support." "The feeling is mutual," Pamela replied Albert with a warm smile. "I'm here for whatever you need, Both professionally and personally, this growing friendship strengthened the work dynamic at Hartford Industries, benefiting the company as a whole. During a break in a conversation, Pamela and Albert took the opportunity to lighten up by talking about more personal topics. Pamela, always curious about people's motivations, turned to Albert with a thoughtful look. "Albert, you've always shown so much determination and passion for what you do. May I ask what inspires you to be so dedicated?" Albert hesitated for a moment before answering. "Well, my inspiration comes largely from a very painful personal story," he began, his gaze distant as it reflected memories. "My father was a very respected businessman, someone I deeply admired, but unfortunately he lost everything due to a devastating swindle." Pamela listened attentively, her heart tightening in empathy. "That must have been terrible," she murmured. Albert nodded, the pain still visible in his eyes. "Yes, it was a hard blow for the whole family. My father couldn't handle the loss. He turned to drinking, and it eventually consumed his life. It was devastating to watch all that." Pamela placed a hand on Albert's arm in a gesture of comfort. "I'm sorry for that, Albert. I can't imagine how difficult it must have been." With a sigh, Albert continued, "Since then, I've made a promise to myself. I swore to be the businessman my father couldn't continue to be. I want to rebuild the legacy he lost." Albert's intimate revelation about the tragedies of his past and his deep motivations unexpectedly touched Pamela's heart. As they walked back to the main building, the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, and the weight of the conversation still lingered between them. Pamela, reflecting on Albert's words, felt a stronger and more personal connection forming between them. "Albert, your story really touched me. I admire your strength and determination in the face of such adversity," she said, her voice laden with sincerity and warmth. Albert looked at her, a sad but grateful smile on his lips. "Thank you, Pamela. It's rare to find someone who understands the weight of these experiences so deeply. Your empathy means a lot to me." In the days and weeks that followed, the relationship between Pamela and Albert blossomed beyond simple workplace camaraderie. They began to share more about their personal lives, finding comfort and mutual understanding. Lunches during work turned into after-hours meetings, not about business but about books, movies, and personal dreams. On a particularly challenging afternoon, after a tense meeting with investors, Pamela found Albert and said, "You always know how to find peace, even on the most chaotic days," she commented, grateful for his constant and reassuring presence. Albert chuckled lightly. "I learned from the best. You have a way of keeping calm that inspires me to be better. I think we've become a great team in everything." These exchanges further strengthened their friendship, transforming professional respect into deep personal loyalty. Their friendship became a pillar of strength for both, enabling them to face together the challenges of leadership and personal obstacles, solidifying an alliance that benefited both their personal lives and their careers. As the months passed, the friendship between Pamela and Albert deepened, gradually weaving the threads of a more personal intimacy. The long conversations and shared coffees during breaks served as a prelude to a stronger and more enduring feeling. On a cool spring evening, while walking together, their conversation naturally flowed into matters of the heart. Albert stopped, looking at Pamela with a serious but affectionate expression. "Pamela, being by your side these past months has been one of the most rewarding periods of my life, professionally and personally. I think I'm starting to feel something more for you," he confessed, his heart beating with hope. Pamela felt a warmth growing inside her, her own emotions echoing Albert's. "Albert, I feel the same," she responded, her voice soft yet firm. "You've become someone very special to me, more than I could have imagined." Encouraged by this exchange of feelings, their relationship quickly evolved into a romance. They began to spend more time together outside of work, exploring new places, sharing experiences, and building a life together while maintaining deep respect and admiration for each other. After a few months of a relationship filled with discoveries and shared joys, Albert planned a marriage proposal befitting their unique story. He arranged a private dinner in the same art gallery where they had first discussed their passion for modern art. The walls were adorned with artworks that spoke of love and commitment. In the middle of the gallery, under the soft light of a contemporary chandelier, Albert knelt and opened a small velvet box. "Pamela, you have transformed my life in ways I never imagined possible. I want to continue building and sharing my life with you. Would you take this journey with me as my wife?" he asked, his gaze fixed on hers, filled with hope and love. Tears of happiness shone in Pamela's eyes as she nodded. "Yes, Albert, I accept," she responded, her voice trembling with emotion. The wedding, celebrated a few months later, was a reflection of their journey, intimate, elegant, and full of meaning, marking the beginning of a new phase in their lives together as life partners. Within the halls and rooms of Hartford Industries, Albert's influence had grown exponentially. Although Franklin remained the principal advisor and trusted right-hand man to Pamela, Albert's rise within the company was undeniable. He had become a central figure in strategic decisions, often involved in high-level meetings and significant projects. His leadership ability and innovative vision earned him a respect nearly equivalent to Franklin's among the team members. On a quiet afternoon, as the office buzzed with usual activity, Albert found himself alone in his office, contemplating the next steps for a new expansion project. His gaze eventually fell on the wallet on his desk, and driven by impulse, he opened it and pulled out a faded photograph. It was an image of his father, captured in a moment of success, with a proud smile that Albert remembered well. Sitting alone in his sumptuous yet cold office, Albert contemplated the faded photograph of his father, a man once powerful and respected. The dim twilight light seeping through the window cast long shadows over the mahogany furniture, mirroring the somber churn of his thoughts. "My father was like Richard, a titan of the industry," he murmured to himself, his voice laden with a complex mix of admiration and resentment. But everything he built crumbled in an instant thanks to a betrayal. At that moment, the room seemed to shrink, the walls adorned with diplomas and recognitions seeming to mock his anguish. With the premature end of his fortune, Albert's life was reduced to a single mission: to restore his family's name and honor. With what was left of the money he had, he spent years absorbing knowledge, attending the best universities, and accumulating experiences, leaving his resume impeccable. One day, Albert was flipping through the newspaper on a peaceful morning when his eyes locked onto an advertisement that seemed to speak directly to him. Hartford Industries was looking for a new senior analyst. With his heart racing, he murmured to himself, "This is more than a coincidence, it's destiny." It turns out Albert believed that Richard, Pamela's father, was responsible for the swindle that ruined his own father. The memory of his father, beaten and defeated, ignited a flame of resolution in Albert. He was determined to infiltrate the company he considered responsible for his family's ruin. Sitting at the kitchen table, Albert began to sketch out a plan. "First, I gain their trust, then I reclaim what is rightfully ours." With meticulous attention to detail, he updated his resume, highlighting the skills and experiences he knew would be irresistible to a company like Hartford Industries. When sending his application, Albert felt every keyboard click as a calculated step in a minefield. Days later, during the interview, he found himself face to face with Franklin, the man who had been Richard's right-hand man. With fabricated confidence and a charismatic smile, Albert was hired. As Albert was absorbed in his thoughts, reliving the moments of the interview and planning his next steps, the sudden sound of his phone brought him back to reality. Looking at the screen, he saw the name of Edith, his lover and accomplice in less orthodox plans. He quickly answered, keeping his voice low to avoid being overheard by others in the office. "Edith, how are you?" he greeted her, trying to keep the tone casual. "Albert, I've been thinking about our plan. How are things over there? Is everything going as we expected?" Edith's voice sounded anxious on the other line. Albert glanced around cautiously before responding, "Yes, everything is moving as planned. I'm positioning myself exactly where we need to be," he said, his tone confident yet low. "Great. I'm here for whatever you need. You know you can count on me for anything, right? Just let me know when you need my intervention," Edith stated, ready to assist in the darker manipulations of the plan. Albert walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline as he spoke. "I know, Edith, and I appreciate that. For now, just hold on. I need to solidify my position here before we take the next step. Don't worry, I'll call you as soon as we need to move forward. Just don't take too long." "Albert, I'm eager to see all this work out," she responded, a mix of excitement and impatience in her voice. Understood, Albert confirmed, ending the call with a silent promise that his plan for revenge would be executed with the precision the moment demanded. With Edith waiting and his own motives burning within him, Albert knew that every move he made needed to be meticulously calculated. As Albert deepened his plan for revenge, his personal life began to feel the consequences of his secret choices. The marriage began to show signs of strain. Pamela, always perceptive and intuitive, began to notice small changes in Albert's behavior. One peaceful afternoon, as they were having tea on the porch of their house, Pamela observed Albert constantly checking his phone, his expression marked by a restlessness she rarely saw. "Albert, you seem distracted lately. Is everything okay at work? Or is there something more?" she asked, concern clear in her voice. Caught off guard by Pamela's direct question, Albert hesitated for a moment before responding, "Oh yes, everything is fine, dear. I'm just dealing with some more demanding projects. Nothing you need to worry about," he said, offering her a forced smile. However, Pamela was not completely convinced. "I understand the pressure of work, Albert, but it seems like you're different. You've been going out more than usual, and sometimes you seem to be in another world." Aware that his frequent excuses to meet Edith might be raising suspicions, Albert knew he needed to handle the situation carefully. "I apologize if I have seemed distant, Pamela. Maybe I should try to balance things better. How about we spend more time together? Let's go out to dinner tonight," he suggested, trying to divert her attention and alleviate her concerns. Pamela smiled, touched by the gesture, but a shadow of doubt remained. "That sounds wonderful, Albert. I just want to make sure we're okay," she said, holding his hand. Albert squeezed her hand in response, his heart heavy with the duplicity of his actions. "Of course we're fine, Pamela. I'll do everything I can to ensure that," he assured her, though deep down he knew that every step in his plan was complicating his life with Pamela further. His commitment to revenge was starting to exact a high price, threatening the fabric of his marriage to the woman he truly loved. Despite everything, as time passed, the cracks in Pamela and Albert's marriage became increasingly apparent. Albert's excuses for his frequent meetings with Edith and his increasingly distant behavior fueled growing tension between them. Pamela, whose patience and understanding had been her virtues, began to feel isolated and neglected in her own home. On a rainy night, after a silent dinner where words seemed too heavy to be spoken, Pamela finally confronted Albert. As the rain drummed against the windows, she looked at him with a mix of frustration and sadness. "Albert, I feel there's something you're not telling me. These work commitments are happening too often. We need to be honest with each other if we want our marriage to work," she said, her voice firm but shaking with contained emotion. Albert, feeling the weight of the inevitable confrontation, tried to remain calm. "Pamela, I assure you, everything is under control. I've just been really busy," he replied, avoiding her gaze. "Busy or evasive?" Pamela retorted, her patience running thin. "A marriage is built on trust and transparency, Albert. I don't feel we're sharing that lately." The argument quickly escalated, with Albert becoming defensive and Pamela more insistent for answers. "I don't know if I recognize you anymore, Albert. The man I married would never have made me feel so left out," she expressed, the pain clear in her words. With the tension reaching a breaking point, Albert, feeling cornered and unable to justify his actions without revealing his true plan, made an abrupt decision. "Maybe I should spend some time away. We need space to think," he said, his decision driven more by impulse than reason. Pamela, surprised and hurt, just nodded. "If that's what you think you need, then go." Albert quickly packed a few things and left the house, leaving behind a confused and worried Pamela. The rain continued to fall, echoing the turbulent emotions that now dominated the once love-filled home. After spending a few days away from home, Albert, holding a bottle of the best wine he could find, a gesture that symbolized both an apology and a means to a more sinister end, knocked gently on the front door. Pamela, surprised and cautious, opened the door to find him soaked from the rain, his eyes laden with a complexity of emotions. "Pamela, I've come to apologize. I was wrong, and nothing justifies the way I've treated you," Albert began, extending the bottle as an olive branch. "Can we talk?" Pamela, still hurt but hopeful for a reconciliation, slowly nodded and let him in. "Maybe I should hear what you have to say," she said, closing the door behind him. In the comfort of the living room, as the rain beat against the windows, Albert opened the bottle and poured 2 glasses of wine. "I brought your favorite wine, hoping we can forget what happened and start anew," he said, handing her one of the glasses. Pamela accepted the glass, hoping it was the first step toward restoring their relationship. "I really want to believe that we can get past this, Albert, but I need you to be honest with me from now on," she replied, bringing the glass to her lips and taking a small sip. However, almost immediately after the wine touched her lips, Pamela felt an overwhelming dizziness. She tried to speak, tried to call for Albert, but her vision blurred and her legs gave out, causing her to collapse on the floor. The truth was that the wine was poisoned, part of Albert's more sinister plan for revenge. Fortunately, he had miscalculated the dosage, which was not fatal but left Pamela unconscious, appearing to be dead. After a period that felt like an eternity wrapped in complete darkness, Pamela slowly began to emerge from her state of unconsciousness. Her mind was foggy, and her body felt like it weighed a ton, each movement a monumental effort. She tried to speak, tried to move, but her bodily functions barely responded to her will. Gradually, her senses began to return, and she realized she was lying on a hard, narrow surface. Confused and disoriented, Pamela tried to orient herself, but something was deeply wrong. That's when she felt the soft lining and heard the muffled echo of her own breaths. She was in a coffin. The shock of this realization made her heart race, a silent panic beginning to take over her. She was at her own funeral. Then, distant voices began to infiltrate her consciousness, the most notable being Albert's. Pamela squeezed her eyes shut, forcing herself to remain calm and pretend inertia to listen to what was being said. "And so we bid farewell to a remarkable woman whose life was as bright as it was brief," she heard Albert say, his voice laden with a sadness that sounded almost genuine to those who didn't know the truth. Pamela was not only a visionary leader but also a loving friend and partner. She will be deeply missed by all of us. Pamela could hardly believe what she was hearing. The irony and audacity of his words left her both furious and terrified. Why would Albert do this? What was the real purpose behind his actions? While Pamela lay motionless inside the coffin, her senses sharpened by adrenaline from fear and urgency, she heard footsteps approaching. It was Albert, accompanied by a second person. Cautiously, she kept her eyes firmly shut, breathing as softly as possible while trying to catch every word exchanged. Albert leaned over the coffin, his voice low, only a murmur audible to Pamela. Beside him stood a female figure. It was Edith, who was disguised as an accountant to avoid raising suspicions among those present at the funeral. "You did a good job," Edith, Albert whispered almost inaudibly. "The poison worked exactly as we planned. With Pamela out of the way, we can finally right the wrongs my father suffered from the blow dealt by Richard." Edith responded with a soft but clearly satisfied voice, pleased with the success of her part in the sinister plan. "I'm relieved everything went as planned, Albert. Now we can really start putting everything in our name without further interference." Pamela, still immobilized by the dose of the poison that had only left her paralyzed, felt a wave of horror and betrayal wash over her. Each word was a stab, a revelation of the true character of the person she had trusted and loved. Albert's words revealed not only his betrayal but a deep and calculating revenge against her deceased father, a conspiracy that now threatened to usurp her entire legacy. The shocking revelation filled Pamela with cold determination. Though her body was still weak and practically inert, her mind began to work frantically, searching for a way to save herself and expose the true nature of Albert and Edith's plans. After the somber funeral, filled with murmurs of condolences, Albert approached the attendees, all still emotional from the loss of Pamela, with a composed expression and studied sadness on his face. He began to speak to the gathered friends and family. "Pamela always had a special appreciation for the tranquility and beauty of nature," he confided to me on several occasions. "Her wish was to rest in peace away from the turmoil of urban life, in a small remote town, where the beauty of the surroundings could reflect the serenity she valued so much," lied Albert, his voice full of false solemnity. The people around, though surprised by this supposedly unknown wish of Pamela's, had nothing to contest, given the emotional state of everyone and the trust they placed in Albert as the grieving widower. Out of respect for her last wishes, we have arranged for her to be buried in a place she chose for its beauty and peace, far from here. Unfortunately, this means that many of us will not be able to accompany her on her final journey," continued Albert, thus dissuading any of the attendees who might want to follow the funeral procession to the burial site. As the attendees digested the information and began to disperse slowly, Albert oversaw the final preparations for the transport of the coffin. Pamela, still inside the coffin and paralyzed by the effects of the poison, listened to every word, every movement, desperate to move or scream, but unable to manifest any sign of life. Darkness enveloped her again, and under the weight of her despair and the toxin in her body, she passed out once more. The coffin was sealed and delivered to a gravedigger in a nearby town, not as remote as Albert had announced, but far enough to deter any unexpected visits. The gravedigger, a man named Bo, was only informed that he should proceed with the burial discreetly, without any additional ceremony, according to the supposed wishes of the deceased. The story fabricated by Albert was just another layer in his meticulously orchestrated plan to take complete control of Pamela's company without further obstacles. Later that day, the gravedigger Bo and his son Victor were busy preparing the site for Pamela's burial. Equipped with shovels and other necessary tools, they worked meticulously, discussing the details of the procedure. The fresh morning air carried a somber silence, broken only by the metallic sound of their tools against the earth. "Make sure everything is in order, Victor. We want to do everything according to the instructions, without mistakes," instructed Bo, as he checked the arrangement of the flowers and the stability of the ground around the grave. As they dedicated themselves to their tasks, a muffled sound began to emerge subtly but increasingly. Initially, Victor thought it might be an animal nearby, but as the sound persisted, it became clear it was coming from inside the coffin. Victor, confused and alarmed, stopped what he was doing and approached cautiously. "Dad, did you hear that?" asked Victor, his voice low and tense. Bo, equally alarmed, dropped his tools and joined his son. Together they listened in silence for a moment until the sounds of faint but desperate tapping became undeniable. "My God, it's coming from inside the coffin," murmured Bo, disbelief mixed with sudden urgency. Quickly, with trembling hands, Victor began to unscrew the lid of the coffin. Each turn of the screws seemed eternal as the noise of the tapping grew louder. Finally, he lifted the lid, and both were shocked to find Pamela lying there, visibly weak but definitely alive, her large, frightened eyes staring directly at them. "Please help me," whispered Pamela, her voice weak and hoarse from the effort and panic. Victor, without hesitation, helped her sit up while Bo fetched water and something to cover her. "How is this possible? You're alive," exclaimed Victor as he helped Pamela drink some water. Pamela, still trying to process her own survival and what had happened, just shook her head, gratitude mixed with confusion in her gaze. "I don't know. I was poisoned. I can explain everything, but please help me get out of here first." Bo and Victor, though stunned by the extraordinary situation, acted quickly to assist Pamela, offering her physical and emotional support while planning their next steps. After the surprising discovery that Pamela was alive, Bo and Victor took her to a small cabin that served as the gravedigger family's residence, located a short distance from the cemetery. There, they could provide her with a warmer and safer environment to regain her strength. As Pamela rested on an improvised bed covered with blankets to keep her warm, Victor cared for her with gentle attention. "I'm not a licensed nurse, but I started studying nursing before our financial situation forced me to stop," Victor explained, checking her pulse and ensuring she was comfortable. "You have very careful hands." "Thank you," Pamela murmured, feeling a bit stronger under his care. "I really appreciate this, but I need to ask something very important from you." Bo, who was watching from the door, approached, indicating that he too was willing to listen and help as needed. "Of course, tell us what you need, ma'am." Pamela took a deep breath, still weak but with urgency clear in her voice. "It's essential that no one knows I am alive, at least for now, for my safety and yours too. There are people who wanted me dead, and until I can expose everything and everyone involved, I need to remain dead to the world." Victor and Bo exchanged worried looks, but their sense of justice and willingness to help spoke louder. It's a difficult request, Pamela, but we understand the gravity of the situation. We will keep your secret, Bo assured, while Victor nodded in agreement. Thank you both. With your help, I hope to correct this and bring justice. But for now, I need to recover and plan my next steps very carefully, Pamela said, her determination firming in her words. In the days that followed, as Pamela slowly regained her strength, that cabin became her refuge and temporary base of operations. Victor continued to apply his nursing skills to assist in her physical recovery, while Bo provided logistical and moral support. Together, they formed an unlikely team, united by fate to confront the injustice that had almost cost Pamela her life. After spending several days recovering under the careful attention of Victor and Bo, Pamela began to feel strong enough to take some action. Sitting at the modest kitchen table in the cabin, she picked up the cell phone that Victor had arranged for her, dialing a number she knew very well. The phone rang a few times before Franklin answered, his voice laden with the usual sorrow since Pamela's supposed death. "Hello, who is this?" "Franklin, it's me, Pamela," she said, her voice still weak but firm. There was a pause on the other side of the line, and then Franklin responded, his voice trembling with shock and emotion. "Pamela, my God, is it really you? How is this possible?" Pamela sighed, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety upon hearing the voice of an old friend. "Yes, Franklin, it's me. I'm alive, but the situation is complicated. I didn't die at the funeral. It was all a setup by Albert. He tried to kill me." Franklin, still trying to absorb the news, replied urgently, "Pamela, that's unbelievable. We need to do something. I need to see you. We need to go to the police." "No, Franklin, not yet," Pamela quickly interrupted. "I need you to keep this a secret for now. There's more at stake here than you can imagine. I heard Albert at the funeral talking to someone about how this was revenge against my father. I need time to figure everything out and plan our next step." There was a pause, and then Franklin spoke, his voice now calmer yet laden with determination. "I understand, Pamela. You have my full support. Tell me what to do and consider it done." "Thank you, Franklin. For now, just keep everything a secret. I'm safe where I am and have help. I'll contact you again soon to update you and maybe ask for your help to expose everything. Until then, take care of everything for me at the company and don't let Albert suspect anything," Pamela instructed. "You can count on me for everything, Pamela. Take care and let me know as soon as you need anything," said Franklin, his voice now firm with the promise of loyalty and support. Hanging up the phone, Pamela felt a wave of gratitude for having friends she could still trust. She knew the road ahead would be difficult and dangerous, but with the support of people like Franklin, Victor, and Bo, she felt ready to face the challenges that lay ahead. Pamela, now significantly stronger and more determined, was ready to take the next step in her journey to expose and confront Albert. Seated at the kitchen table with Bo and Victor, who had become her saviors and accomplices in her quest for justice, she meticulously outlined her plan. "I need concrete evidence of Albert's actions and everything he planned against me," Pamela began, her gaze fixed on a notebook Victor had lent her. "For that, I need access to his communications, emails, messages, everything." Victor, observing the determination on her face, suggested, "I know someone who can help a friend from university. He specializes in cybersecurity. I can contact him if you think it might help." Pamela nodded her head, grateful for the support network forming around her. "Please do that. The faster we can get the information, the better." Victor promptly took his cell phone and stepped out of the room to make the call, ensuring more privacy and security. Shortly after, he returned with good news. He agreed to help Pamela. He said he can start working immediately as soon as you provide the details he needs. With technical assistance secured, Pamela sat down again with Bo and Victor to detail how they would proceed. "Once we have access to Albert's communications, we need to review everything carefully. Any message, any call could be the key to exposing his attempt to kill me, along with other illegalities he might have committed." In the following days, the hacker hired by Victor began his work, diving into the digital depths of Albert's life. Pamela awaited each update with a mix of anxiety and hope, knowing that each piece of information gathered was one step closer to justice. With each new piece of evidence that emerged, Pamela felt a mix of relief and outrage. Compromising messages and call logs revealed the depth of Albert's betrayal and armed Pamela with the tools necessary for her final confrontation. She knew that with this evidence in hand, she could protect herself and ensure that Albert faced the consequences of his nefarious actions. While Pamela meticulously planned her strategy for revenge and gathered evidence against Albert, a grand party was being organized at the Hartford Industries headquarters. The event was carefully planned to celebrate Albert's appointment as the new president of the company, officially marking the transfer of power after the tragic and supposed death of Pamela. The party was decorated extravagantly, with elegant lighting and live music filling the opulent air of the company's main hall. High-ranking employees and executives, along with important stakeholders and media, were invited to witness and participate in this significant moment in the company's history. The atmosphere was celebratory but also filled with palpable expectation, as everyone was eager to see how Albert would guide the company into the future. Edith, elegantly dressed, was particularly radiant, mingling with the guests while holding a glass of champagne. Her presence at the party was not just as a guest, but as a key player in Albert's power game. As his accomplice, she shared the dark secret of his rise to power and expected to reap personal benefits from Albert's new position. Her complicity in the plot against Pamela was driven by promises of future gains, which made her circulate through the party with an air of confidence and ownership. Albert is finally where he should be, and now we can really start shaping the future of this company, Edith subtly commented to some of the most influential executives, smiling conspiratorially as if sharing a secret of imminent success. As the music filled the room and speeches of congratulations echoed through the hall, Albert prepared to make his acceptance speech. He stepped onto the stage with a charismatic smile, ready to solidify his position as the leader of Hartford Industries. His speech was loaded with promises of innovation and growth, but behind his polished words hid the dark truth of his rise to power. During the inauguration ceremony at Hartford Industries, a highly anticipated moment was the traditional display of videos. These videos, meticulously prepared, highlighted the journey of employees who reached leadership positions within the company, narrating their significant contributions and inspiring trajectories. It was a way to honor their dedication and successes while motivating others in the company to follow their exemplary steps. As the party progressed, the guests gathered in front of the large screen to watch Albert's video, expecting to be inspired by his rise to the highest office of the company. The room was filled with a murmur of expectation as the lights dimmed and the video began. However, what was supposed to be a tribute quickly turned into shock and dismay. Instead of images of Albert working diligently or leading projects, what echoed through the speakers were recordings of compromising conversations. Clear and distinctly, Albert's voice could be heard in dialogue with Edith, detailing nefarious plans and confirming the intent to eliminate Pamela to secure his position of power. "Are you sure this will work?" Edith's voice asked, anxious and complicit. "Don't worry. Everything is planned. Once she's out of the way, the company will be ours," responded Albert with calculated coldness. The room immediately plunged into stunned silence, with all eyes turned to Albert, who stood pale and visibly shocked by what was being revealed. The expressions of the attendees ranged from disbelief to indignation, as murmurs of shock and disapproval began to spread. With the evidence of his betrayal and attempted murder brought for all to see and hear, Albert desperately tried to regain control of the situation. Still on stage, he attempted to explain. "This must be some kind of sick joke," he said, his voice trembling under the weight of the accusations raised by the recordings. "We know this may seem shocking," he continued, trying to convince the audience that the recordings were falsified. "Someone clearly manipulated these recordings to harm me. I would never do such a thing." At the climax of the tension and confusion that had overtaken Albert's inauguration party, everyone's attention was suddenly captured by the sound of the grand hall's double doors swinging open abruptly. A collective silence fell over the crowd as Pamela, supposedly dead, entered with a resolute posture and a look of fierce determination. The guests, who seconds before had been murmuring among themselves about the shocking recordings, now turned in unison, their faces registering a mix of absolute shock and disbelief. Pamela, elegantly dressed but with seriousness etched into every line of her face, walked down the center of the hall with firm and confident steps, each gaze fixed on her, intensifying the dramatic atmosphere. Albert, pale and visibly shaken by Pamela's sudden appearance, stuttered, trying to formulate an explanation. "Pamela, is it really you? This is a misunderstanding. I can explain," he began, his hands trembling slightly as he tried to approach her. Pamela, however, raised a hand to silence him, her clear and powerful voice echoing through the hall. "There is nothing to explain, Albert," she declared, her presence dominating the room. "The recordings speak for themselves, and your attempt to remove me from the picture has been uncovered." The murmurs among the guests grew in volume and intensity as many exchanged looks of shock and horror. Some began to physically distance themselves from Albert, as if repelled by the truth of his actions now clearly exposed. "I am back," Pamela continued, her voice resonating with a mix of authority and relief, "and I am here to ensure that justice is served. Hartford Industries deserves leadership that is free from corruption and conspiracy." The hall was still buzzing with the electric energy of Pamela's dramatic revelation when she turned again to Albert, who seemed increasingly isolated as guests moved away from him, whispering among themselves. With the room now hanging on her every word, Pamela seized the moment to delve deeper into her exposure. "Albert," she began, her voice firm and resolute, capturing everyone's attention in the room, "I heard everything. While I was trapped inside that coffin, I heard every word of your conspiracy." The silence that followed was palpable, with many in the room exchanging looks of astonishment and disbelief. Pamela continued, looking directly into Albert's eyes. "And while I was recovering, I dedicated my time to discovering more about the story you used to justify your actions." She paused, ensuring she had the complete attention of Albert and everyone else present. "I discovered something quite interesting about your father, Albert. Contrary to what you believed, it was he who attempted to cheat my father, Richard. He planned a coup that was promptly discovered, and as a result, he was fired. But in telling the story to you, he painted himself as the victim, altering the facts to protect himself and creating in you a false sense of injustice." Albert, now completely pale, struggled to formulate a response, his previous facade of confidence completely crumbled. "You based your vengeance on a lie, Albert, a lie that almost cost me my life," Pamela concluded, unmasking Albert and painting a clear picture of his manipulation and betrayal. Visibly shaken, and now aware of the collapse of his justifications, Albert took a faltering step toward Pamela. With a tremulous voice, tinged with a sudden understanding of the consequences of his actions, he attempted to articulate an apology. "Pamela, I didn't know. I was a fool, manipulated by lies. I am so sorry for all of this." Pamela, maintaining an unshakable composure, merely observed as Albert struggled under the weight of his own conscience. Before she could respond, the sound of hurried footsteps and radio communications filled the hall, announcing the arrival of the police. The officers, already well informed about the situation thanks to Pamela's prior contact, entered the hall with determination and purpose. "Albert Martins and Edith Anderson, you are under arrest for conspiracy and attempted murder," declared one of the officers as they approached the couple. Edith, who until then had remained a silent figure beside Albert, now shared the same expression of shock and dread as the police handcuffed Albert and Edith, leading them out of the hall. The room was in a state of shock but also palpable relief, especially among those who had been closest to Pamela. The swift action of the police only solidified the seriousness of Pamela's revelations and the justice now unfolding before their eyes. Pamela watched calmly as Albert and Edith were escorted out, her expression a mix of relief and sadness. Although the outcome was necessary, there was no joy in the downfall of someone she had once considered part of her life. With the police taking control of the situation, Pamela knew that the true rebuilding of Hartford Industries and her life could finally begin. After the dramatic conclusion in the company hall, with Albert and Edith being taken away by the police, Pamela felt an immense weight lifted from her shoulders. With the threat now eliminated, she could finally breathe a sigh of relief and start contemplating the future with a new perspective. Pamela was deeply aware that her survival and subsequent victory over the conspiracy would not have been possible without the help of Beau and his son, Victor. The gratitude she felt for them was immeasurable, and she knew she needed to find a meaningful way to express her thanks. A few days after Albert's arrest, Pamela visited Beau and Victor at their modest residence. With a warm and sincere smile, she greeted them, bringing her gratitude along with a concrete proposal to show her appreciation. Victor, I can never thank you enough for everything you've done for me," began Pamela, her voice laden with emotion. "You saved me from a terrible fate and gave me the chance to seek justice." Victor, always humble and kind, smiled. "We were just doing what was right, Pamela. We're glad everything worked out for you." Pamela nodded, moved, before continuing. "Victor, I know you had to interrupt your nursing studies due to financial difficulties. I would like to pay for your education so you can return to college and complete your course." Victor's eyes lit up, surprised and filled with gratitude. "Pamela, that would be incredible. I don't even know how to thank you." "Consider it a small gesture for the immense favor you've done for me," Pamela replied, smiling. "It's the least I can do." With Pamela's financial support, Victor was able to re-enroll in university, resuming his journey to become a nurse. His dedication and passion for the profession only grew, driven by gratitude and the desire to help others as he had helped Pamela. When Victor finally graduated, the ceremony was a moment of great pride and joy for him and Beau. Pamela, of course, was there, cheering him on from the front row, her heart full of pride and satisfaction at seeing Victor achieve his dream, knowing that his new path was just beginning. In the months that followed, as Victor delved into his new career as a nurse, he and Pamela found themselves meeting with increasing frequency. What started as meetings to express gratitude and share updates about their lives soon blossomed into a deep and meaningful friendship. They discovered many common interests, from a passion for helping others to a love for nature and art. On a sunny afternoon, while walking through the city, talking about everything from literature to their future dreams, Pamela stopped and looked at Victor with an affectionate smile. "You know, Victor, I never thought I'd find someone who could understand so deeply what I went through. You've been a true friend." Victor, whose admiration for Pamela only grew with each day, felt his heart beat faster at her words. "Pamela, being by your side has been one of the greatest joys of my life. You inspire me every day," he confessed, his sincere gaze meeting hers. From that moment, what was a strong friendship gently transformed into something more. It was as if the universe had conspired to bring them together, to heal the wounds of the past, and to build a future filled with hope and love. Unlike Albert, whose actions were driven by vengeance and deceit, Victor loved Pamela with an open and pure heart, valuing honesty and mutual respect above all. He supported her unconditionally, celebrating her victories and offering comfort in difficult times. As time passed, their love only deepened, rooted in a solid foundation of trust and mutual admiration. Together they built a life full of complicity, learning, and joy. Their days were marked by shared laughter, deep conversations, and an unwavering commitment to support each other in all endeavors. Finally, on a quiet autumn night under a starry sky, Victor and Pamela promised each other a future together, sealing their commitment with a passionate kiss. It was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives as soulmates, ready to face whatever life had in store for them, with the certainty that any challenge would be lesser in the face of the true and deep love they shared.